Joining us on ET now, a very special guest, Dr. Arvind Subramanian. Thank you very much for being with us. It's a great morning, and many people believe that with your GST rate and the entire report, do you believe you've paved the ground for a political consensus? Have you paved the ground, at least for the GST, to be far more palatable than it has been in the past?
You know, that's a call for others to make. We've just done a report that's, adheres strictly to what I would think is the best possible technical analysis of the rates and the structure of rates and so on. So my job was much more, our job of the committee was much more to do, a really rigorous technical analysis, and the outcome is what it is, and it's for others to say whether it helps or not. If it helps, that's very good. It would be a big bonus.
So the technical analysis and the economic solution is perhaps going to pave the ground, at least for a political solution, because many people believe some of the things in your report are perhaps also the things that the principal opposition was demanding and on issues of which the GST was stalled. Did that play in your mind at all when you were preparing this final report? The 1% tax or the revenue neutral rate being low, the standard rate being about 17 to 18%.
There is obviously an overall background to these discussions, but our job was a purely technical one, and in no way was the analysis or the outcome geared to any particular political agenda. We had to do it. I mean, I would lose my credibility as the chief economic advisor if I started slanting the analysis to suit political outcomes.
But your technical solutions seems to have paved the way for a political consensus.
If good economics is good politics,
so be it.
So be it.
Let me ask you a very specific question on the revenue neutral rate. You've given a band of 15 to 15.5%. Some of the experts who've been on the channel here on ET now believe that is perhaps too narrow a band. Does that give states enough flexibility to play around with that revenue neutral rate, you believe?
See, firstly, just to clarify that, that revenue neutral rate is in some ways a kind of notional or a conceptual rate.
Yes.
It will then get transferred into a whole structure of rates, including a low rate, a standard rate, and a high rate. Now, the question of flexibility for the states is actually a very good and an important question. But remember, I think that the states are going to retain a lot of flexibility under the current system, because they will continue to be able to tax alcohol, tax petroleum for the thing, and also all the other goods and services that are exempt from the scope of GST. So there's plenty of room for states plenty of fiscal autonomy without having to tinker with the GST rates themselves.
So while we're talking about specifics, I want to draw your attention to the 40%, that's the sin tax, so to say. Some eyebrows being raised on why have you included luxury in there, because a lot of multinationals that we've spoken to believe it has really taken the thrill away from the GST. You're leaving it at the discretion of the states to underline and to define what luxury is. Can a chocolate be luxury? Can a perfume bottle over 500 rupees be luxury? How are you going to define what is really luxury? Because in Europe, 40% is almost double of your standard rate, if not more. How do you justify that?
First of all, remember that many of the goods that are now in the luxury category are already taxed at very high rates. We've not added any new items to the list.
Yes.
So in that sense, it's just the status quo. So I don't think there should be any concern on that. Your second point was
about the sin tax.
About the sin tax, I think in terms of what goes in, we've recommended a very narrow list of things. So, in any case, all these things will be discussed in the GST Council, but our preference would be to keep it to a fairly narrow list of clearly defined items.
Why I'm asking you that question is that in Europe, for instance, the sin tax is around 27%. Their rate is between 17.5 to 21%. Do you believe 40% is exorbitantly high, and have you consciously done that? And do you think this is going to dent consumption of the sin items, so to say?
See, firstly, remember the comparison with Europe also has to take into account the fact that the standard rates themselves are very high.
That's right, yes.
Okay? Yeah. So in that sense, the comparison is not apples to apples. Now, the thing is that the world over, all countries have these, sin is maybe a bad word, but taxes on demerit goods.
That's right, yes.
Yeah? So whether it's environment, whether it's pollution, whether it's health, whether it's luxury consumption. So I think those are all political calls that have to be made. But I think the key point here is that, I mean, the report per se does not call for any change in the status quo. So we're just saying preserve the status quo. But, you know, for example, today at the center, there are multiple rates on many of these categories. So all we're saying is that clean it up, simplify it, and have one rate. Because again, the benefits of compliance from this are going to be huge.
Have you given 40%, which is way too high, which is almost 100% of the standard rate, over 100% of the standard rate, consciously because you want to dent the demerit consumption?
No, again, as I said, see, the comparison with the standard rate is not, I think, the right one, because that rate has been decided based on what the situation is today. So in that sense, we're not tinkering with anything.
Aerated drinks being a part of it has raised some eyebrows and got you some dislikes on the Facebook page, if I may. What went behind your mind while you were including it?
No, again, these are all what is happening today. We've not tinkered with the status quo, because I certainly we didn't interpret our mandate as, prescribing tax policy. This is a fairly technical exercise. As I emphasized, the policy component is going to be a set of political decisions that will eventually be made in the GST Council.
One of the things that you recommended and that has gone in very well, at least with the political class, is the abolition of the 1% additional levy. You've said there's no reason for you to go through with that. Do you expect a backlash from the manufacturing states? And the follow-up to that really is that will you expect a special compensation formula for manufacturing states? Because some of them will be up in arms against this move.
See, I think first of all, this 1% duty is something that I've been saying for a long time, and many others have been saying for a long time. I think the key point in this to remember is one of the big advantages of the GST is what we say in the report: make in India by making one India.
That's right. Yes.
That I think is really important. So if the Prime Minister's vision of make in India has to be realized, I mean, this has to be one part of that. And it's ironic that in this day and age, we should, through our tax policy, favor producing overseas to favor producing in India. So I think all the things that do that, including in this case the 1%, I think. And in terms of compensation, our committee didn't have a specific remit for compensation, but I think that's a decision that will have to be taken by.
But I'll urge you to wear your economist's hat on this, because manufacturing states will feel that they have been compromised on this one recommendations. Will you expect an additional or a special compensation for them?
No.
And do you expect a backlash to begin with?
Actually, if you read our report, we actually do a kind of illustrative exercise, an analytical exercise of, what is likely to be the future potential GST base compared to the current base, and we actually find that there's not very much difference. So it turns out that the manufacturing states, the big producer manufacturing states, are also going to be the big consumers of services. So in that sense, there's going to be some, offset.
It balances it out.
Exactly.
In some sense.
And there is analysis in the report that I would urge all of you to read on this.
Fair point. Dr. Subramanian, I also want to draw your attention to one of the things that you have said, that the base rate or the cap on the rate doesn't have to be a part of the Constitution. Now that has raised a few eyebrows, because people believe, are you leaving that rate at the mercy of states? Should you not have that as a part of the Constitution? What are your reasons for recommending that it should not be a part of the Constitution per se?
See, I'm not a...
and there you have ruffled a few feathers with the opposition.
No.
Unknowingly so.
I'm not a lawyer in this, but you just see things around the world that, the minutiae of tax policy, I mean, should not be put in any constitution, because for a number of reasons. Firstly, these are details and these are choices that have to be made by the political process. Second, that, if you cast these things in stone, then what happens, if suddenly circumstances change radically in the future, one way or the other? And so, do we want to have, irrevocable tax policy? And so those are the grounds on which I think that I think it would not, leave it to the political process. I think I don't know what the framers of the Constitution would think if they were told that some very, very detailed aspects of
taxation
tax policy
should be a part of your mandate as well.
So So, that's a...
There's a very audacious attempt that you've made to make the political class understand that petroleum, alcohol, real estate and electricity at some stage should be a part of, should be under the GST ambit. According to you, and this is obviously the politically contentious recommendation that you've made, over what period of time do you see this happening? Because we given to understand one of the bargaining tools really has been to leave petroleum and alcohol out of the GST to begin with.
Yeah, and I mean, we have, as a technical committee, have to respect the political process. But as an economist, one wants, I mean, and this is very, it's a kind of principle of tax policy that's absolutely universally acknowledged, that, tax rates, tax policy and the structure of tax rates is best when the base is as wide as possible.
That's right.
And the rates, therefore, the rates are as low as possible, because it's good for the consumer, it's good for compliance, it's good for administrative efficiency. So that's that's what we should work towards.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow, and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.